The glaring crimson sunlight of Gyra Prime streaked through the reinforced windows of Vega Outpost, casting long shadows across the metal floor. Dr. Lena Oren stood motionless before the observation glass, watching the creature pace within its containment field. The Zorax was magnificent, nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, its body covered in iridescent spines that shifted between deep violet and electric blue depending on its mood. Currently, those spines were rigidly extended, signaling aggression. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lena whispered, more to herself than to anyone else in the room. Security Chief Malk Varen snorted behind her. "Beautiful? That thing disemboweled 2 of my best officers during capture. I've seen what those claws can do to reinforced combat armor. There's nothing beautiful about a killing machine." Lena turned to face him, her expression serene despite the tension in the room. "Every predator has evolved for survival. Chief Varen, the Zorax didn't ask to be born on a Deathworld. It simply adapted to thrive here." The year was 2257, humanity's 3rd century of interstellar travel, and the Federation of Tame Sciences had established outposts on dozens of hostile worlds across the galaxy. Gyra Prime, classified as a Category 5 Deathworld, was considered among the most dangerous. Everything on this planet seemed designed to kill, from microscopic parasites that could liquefy human tissue in hours, to apex predators like the Zorax that ruled the vast sand wastes. Yet here they were, attempting what many considered impossible: Project Companion, the initiative to domesticate Deathworld predators as protective pets. The irony wasn't lost on Lena. Humans had spent millennia taming Earth's most dangerous predators, wolves into dogs, wildcats into companions, all because they wanted something soft to cuddle. Now, centuries later, they were attempting the same feat with creatures infinitely more lethal. "Dr. Oren," a voice called from the monitoring station. Rafe Keller, the team's neurobiological engineer, gestured for her to join him. "The neural scans are complete. You should see this." Lena crossed the room, aware of Malk's disapproving gaze following her. The chief had made no secret of his opposition to the project, advocating instead for extermination of the monsters that threatened the outpost's security. But that wasn't an option, not with the Federation's substantial investment and the potential commercial applications of successfully domesticated Deathworld predators. "What have you found?" Lena asked, leaning over Rafe's shoulder to examine the holographic display. "Its neural pathways are unlike anything I've seen," Rafe explained, manipulating the 3D model with practiced gestures. "Look here, the limbic system is proportionally massive, suggesting intense emotional responses. And these connections to the frontal cortex? Fascinating. Meaning it's intelligent. Far more than we initially theorized. And potentially capable of forming strong emotional bonds." Lena smiled. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. "Then our approach remains valid. We form a connection, establish trust, and work from there." "If I may," interrupted Malk, who had approached silently, "intelligence in a predator doesn't make it less dangerous. It makes it more so. This isn't some Earth canine you're dealing with, Doctor. It's evolved to hunt and kill anything that moves." "Which is precisely why gaining its trust is so crucial," Lena countered. "The Zorax are apex predators. They don't have natural enemies. Their aggression is targeted at what they perceive as threats. If we can demonstrate that we aren't threats, that's a big if when the creature in question can tear through titanium reinforcement with those claws." The argument was interrupted by the arrival of Zara Chen, the team's reconnaissance pilot. She strode into the lab, still wearing her flight suit, her dark hair tied back in a practical knot. "Perimeter scan complete," she announced. "No signs of Puck-Thor activity within 20 kilometers. But there's a dust storm brewing in the southwest quadrant. We'll have reduced visibility by morning." Lena nodded. The Puck-Thor were another of Gyra Prime's lethal predators, pack hunters that seemed to have an ancient rivalry with the solitary Zorax. Their presence could complicate the already dangerous work ahead. Thank you, Zara. We'll need to accelerate our timeline. Rafe, how soon can the neural nanobots be ready? The engineer hesitated. 24 hours, minimum. We need to calibrate them specifically to Zorak's neurochemistry, based on these new scans. You have 18, Lena decided. The storm might drive Puck-Thor Pax toward the outpost. I want our subject cooperative before that happens. Later that evening, Lena sat alone in her quarters, reviewing data on her tablet. The Zorax, specimen XR7, though she'd begun to think of it as simply 7, had been captured 3 days earlier, after a grueling hunt that had cost lives and resources. It was the 7th Zorax they'd attempted to contain. The previous 6 had either escaped or died resisting capture. A knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called, setting aside the tablet. Zara stepped in, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "Thought you could use this," she said, offering one to Lena. "It's the closest thing to coffee this forsaken rock has to offer." Lena accepted the mug gratefully. The synthetic beverage was a poor substitute for real coffee, but it contained the caffeine she desperately needed. "Thanks. Couldn't sleep?" Zara settled into the chair opposite Lena's desk. "Not with a storm coming and a monster down in containment. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't work yourself to death." Their friendship had formed quickly after Lena's arrival at Vega Outpost 6 months earlier. As the only 2 women on the senior staff, they'd naturally gravitated toward each other, but it was their shared belief in the project that had cemented their bond. While others saw the dangers, Zara and Lena saw possibilities. "Malk thinks I'm naive," Lena said after a long sip of the bitter drink. "Malk has buried too many friends on this planet," Zara replied. "Can't blame him for being cautious. Caution is one thing. Refusing to see potential is another." Lena set down her mug. "Do you know why I joined this project, Zara?" The pilot shook her head. "When I was a child, I had a dog, a Siberian husky named Nova. Beautiful creature, descended from wolves that once would have hunted humans. But Nova was gentle, protective. She saved my life once when I fell through ice while skating. Pulled me out, kept me warm until help came." Lena's eyes grew distant with the memory. That's what domestication achieved with Earth's predators, turning potential enemies into allies. Imagine what we could accomplish with the Zorax. "If we survive the process," Zara added with a wry smile. "There's that," Lena agreed. "But I believe it's possible. The scans Rafe took today support my theory. These creatures have the capacity for bonding. We just need to tap into it." "Well," Zara said, rising to leave, "if anyone can charm a death monster, it's you. Just be careful. Lena, some things don't want to be tamed." As Zara departed, Lena returned to her data. Tomorrow, they would begin the first real test of her theory, the introduction of neural nanobots designed to modulate the Zorax's aggressive responses, while leaving its cognitive functions intact. It was a delicate balance. Too much suppression could damage the creature's natural instincts. Too little would leave it dangerous. The future of Project Companion, and possibly her career, rested on the outcome. Morning arrived with the predicted dust storm. From the command center's windows, Lena could see only swirling crimson clouds, occasionally illuminated by flashes of static electricity. The environmental suits they'd need to wear outside today would have to include enhanced filtration and electromagnetic shielding. "Nanobot integration is ready," Rafe announced as she entered the lab. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd worked through the night. "I've programmed them to target only the aggression centers. They won't affect cognition or emotional response." "Excellent work," Lena said, examining the suspension of microscopic robots in the injector. The clear liquid seemed innocuous, belying its sophisticated technology. "Has 7 been sedated?" "Minimal dose only, as you requested. It's alert but temporarily docile." Lena nodded approval. "Let's proceed then." The containment chamber, was a marvel of engineering. 20-centimeter thick, transparent aluminum walls reinforced with energy fields, designed to hold creatures that could tear through standard starship hulls. As Lena entered through the airlock, she felt a momentary flutter of fear. The Zorax was indeed sedated, lying on its side with its 6 muscular limbs splayed out, but its yellow eyes tracked her movement with predatory focus. "Easy now," she murmured, knowing her voice wouldn't penetrate the creature's understanding, but hoping her tone might. "I'm not here to hurt you." She approached cautiously, injector in hand. The Zorax's spines rippled slightly, a warning sign, but not the full threat display that would precede an attack. Its massive head, somewhat reminiscent of Earth's extinct theropod dinosaurs, but broader and protected by a natural crest of bone, turned to follow her. "Dr. Oren," Malk's voice came through her earpiece. "If that thing makes any sudden moves, I'm flooding the chamber with nerve gas. My men have their weapons trained on it." "That won't be necessary," she replied calmly. 7 is cooperating." She knelt beside the creature's neck, searching for the insertion point Rafe had identified. The scales here were smaller, more flexible, allowing access to a major blood vessel. The Zorax's breath came in deep, rumbling exhalations that she could feel through the floor. "Almost there," she whispered, more for her own comfort than communication. With practiced precision, she pressed the injector against the creature's neck and activated it. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. The Zorax roared, a sound so powerful it seemed to vibrate the very molecules of air, and surged to its feet, throwing Lena backward. Its spines flared to full extension, glowing with bioluminescent threat displays. The sedative had worn off far more quickly than anticipated. "Lena, get out of there!" Malk shouted through the comm. "We're deploying gas!" "No," she countermanded, scrambling backward as the Zorax advanced. "It's just responding to the injection pain. Give it a moment." The creature stalked toward her, 6 clawed limbs moving in perfect predatory coordination. Its pupils had contracted to vertical slits, focusing entirely on her. Lena fought the instinct to run, knowing it would trigger the chase response. Instead, she slowly rose to her feet, making herself appear larger while maintaining eye contact. "Easy, 7, she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know that hurt. I'm sorry." The Zorax stopped, head tilting slightly, as if confused by her behavior. Its spines remained extended, but ceased their threatening glow. For several tense seconds, predator and human regarded each other in silence. Then, gradually, the nanobots began their work. The creature's posture relaxed incrementally, its breathing slowed, and its spines partially retracted. It made a sound, a low, rumbling vocalization, unlike its previous roar. "That's it," Lena encouraged. "No need for aggression here." "Remarkable," Rafe's voice came through her earpiece. "The nanobots are integrating perfectly. Aggression indicators are dropping while awareness remains high." Lena kept her eyes on the Zorax, which had settled onto its haunches, still watching her with predatory focus, but no longer advancing. Slowly, telegraphing her movements, she extended her hand, palm up, a universal gesture of peace. The Zorax regarded her hand, then, to everyone's astonishment, extended one of its upper limbs toward her. The movement was hesitant, almost curious. The massive clawed appendage dwarfed her entire arm, capable of shredding her in an instant. "Dr. Oren," Malk warned, "don't even think about—" But Lena had already made her decision. With deliberate slowness, she touched her fingertips to the creature's foreclaw. The texture was surprisingly warm, like polished stone heated by the sun. The Zorax didn't withdraw, didn't attack. It simply maintained the contact, studying her with those intelligent yellow eyes. "First contact," Lena whispered, a smile spreading across her face. "Log it, Rafe. Successful initiation of trust building with subject XR7. Later, in the debriefing room, opinions were sharply divided. What you did was reckless and violated at least 6 safety protocols. Malk fumed, pacing the length of the conference table. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, Lena pointed out calmly. 7 responded to the non-threatening approach exactly as my theory predicted. The nanobots are working, moderating aggression without dampening intelligence. We got lucky, Malk countered. One successful interaction doesn't prove domestication is possible. No one's claiming instant domestication, Rafe interjected, displaying the neural scans on the room's main screen. But the data is encouraging. Look at these response patterns during the interaction. There's definite curiosity alongside the expected predatory assessment. Zara, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. So, what's the next step? We can't exactly take it for walks around the compound. Actually, Lena said, controlled environmental exposure is precisely what I'm proposing. The room fell silent. You want to let it out? Malk asked incredulously. In a highly controlled setting, Lena clarified. A larger containment area where 7 can experience more varied stimuli. The bonding process requires interaction beyond a sterile chamber. And when it decides to tear through the walls of this larger containment, the nanobots provide a safeguard. We can remotely trigger sedation if necessary. Lena turned to address the entire team. Look, I understand the concerns, but if we're serious about this project, we need to progress beyond basic containment. The Federation expects results, not just reports of a successfully captured specimen. Director Ellison, who had been observing the debate silently from the head of the table, finally spoke. Dr. Oren makes a valid point. The purpose of Project Companion isn't merely to study these creatures in captivity, but to determine if domestication is possible. However, he added, glancing at Malk, security concerns are equally valid. He considered for a moment, fingers steepled beneath his chin. We'll compromise. Construct a reinforced outdoor enclosure connected to the current containment. Double the security measures, including perimeter energy fields and emergency sedation protocols. If the Zorax continues to demonstrate reduced aggression over the next week, we'll proceed with controlled exposure experiments. Malk opened his mouth to protest, but Ellison raised a hand. This is not open for debate, Chief Varen. The Federation has invested billions in this project. We will proceed with appropriate caution, but we will proceed. As the meeting dispersed, Zara fell into step beside Lena in the corridor. Well played, she murmured, but Malk isn't wrong about the dangers. I know, Lena admitted, but I saw something in Seven's eyes today. Zara, recognition, understanding. It's in there, the capacity for connection. Let's hope you're right, because if you're wrong... If I'm wrong, I'll be the first to admit it, Lena assured her. And likely the first to be eaten. The construction of the outdoor enclosure took 3 days, during which Lena spent every available moment with Seven. The Zorax had begun to recognize her, responding to her voice with attention rather than aggression. Rafe's nanobots continued to function perfectly, modulating the creature's most violent impulses while preserving its natural behaviors. On the 4th day, they prepared for the first outdoor session. The enclosure was impressive, 50 meters square, surrounded by energy fields and physical barriers, with various environmental features mimicking the Zorax's natural habitat. Rock formations, sand pits, even a small water source. Remember, Malk instructed his security team, if that thing makes any move toward the barriers, you hit it with enough tranquilizer to drop a starship. Dr. Oren's safety is priority 1. Lena, suited up in lightweight armor despite her protests that it would send the wrong message to Seven, approached the connecting tunnel between the containment chamber and the new enclosure. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see the Zorax pacing, sensing the change in its environment. Open the inner door, she commanded. The barrier slid aside. Seven immediately focused on the opening. nostrils flaring as it detected the outside air, probably the first it had smelled since capture. "Come on," Lena encouraged, stepping backward into the tunnel. "Let's explore together." To everyone's surprise, the creature followed without hesitation, its massive form moving with unexpected grace despite the confined space. As they reached the outer door, Lena paused. "Ready for this?" she asked softly. The outer door opened, revealing the expansive enclosure. Sunlight streamed in, reflecting off the Zorax's scales in prismatic patterns. The creature hesitated only briefly before striding forward, head raised to survey its new domain. Lena followed at a respectful distance, allowing Seven to investigate without interference. The creature moved methodically around the perimeter, occasionally stopping to examine a particular feature with its keen senses. Its behavior was remarkably similar to Earth predators assessing new territory, cautious but confident. "Neural readings are stable," Rafe reported through her earpiece. "No aggression spikes. It seems pleased." Indeed, the Zorax's spines had taken on a subtle blue-green hue that they'd begun to associate with positive emotional states. After completing its circuit of the enclosure, it returned to where Lena stood, regarding her with what she could only interpret as expectation. "What is it?" she wondered aloud. "What do you want from me?" Seven made a low, vocalizing sound, then turned and moved toward one of the rock formations, stopping to look back at her. "I think it wants you to follow," Zara suggested through the comm. Intrigued, Lena complied, maintaining a safe distance but following the creature's lead. Seven led her to a particular rock formation, with a flat surface warmed by the sun. There, to her astonishment, it settled its massive body down and extended a limb toward the space beside it. "Is it inviting you to sit?" Rafe's voice held disbelief. "That's exactly what it's doing," Lena realized, a sense of triumph welling within her. This was social behavior, the foundation of domestication. Cautiously, she approached and sat on the indicated rock, about a meter from the creature's side. Seven made another vocalization, softer this time, and its eyes half closed in what appeared to be contentment. "It's working," Lena whispered, barely able to contain her excitement. "Log this interaction. First voluntary social engagement initiated by subject XR7. For the next hour, she simply sat with the Zorax, occasionally speaking softly, about nothing in particular, allowing it to become accustomed to her presence and voice. By the time they returned to the inner containment area, Lena was convinced they'd made a breakthrough. "It's recognizing me as a non-threat," she explained to the team afterward. "More than that, it's identifying me as a social entity, someone to interact with rather than prey to hunt. Or it's lulling you into a false sense of security before it eats you," Malk suggested darkly. "Always the optimist." "Chief Varen," Lena replied with a smile. "But the neurological data supports my interpretation. Seven's brain activity during our interaction showed patterns consistent with social engagement, not hunting behavior. Over the following weeks, progress continued steadily. Seven began responding to basic vocal commands, simple things like come and stay, reinforced with hand signals. The Zorax demonstrated remarkable intelligence, often anticipating Lena's requests before she fully expressed them. More surprisingly, it began showing protective behaviors. When a maintenance drone malfunctioned during one session, swooping erratically near Lena, Seven positioned itself between her and the perceived threat, spines raised but not fully extended, a controlled response rather than blind aggression. "It's protecting you," Zara observed during their evening meal. "Just like your husky did." "The comparison isn't exact," Lena cautioned. "But yes, there are parallels. The capacity for bonding and protective behavior appears to be universal among intelligent predators, regardless of their evolutionary origin." "The Federation will be pleased," Rafe noted. Protective instincts directed toward humans is exactly what they're hoping to commercialize. Lena frowned slightly. While she understood the project's objectives, she'd grown increasingly uncomfortable with the idea of weaponizing these magnificent creatures. Seven wasn't just a potential guard dog or military asset. It was an intelligent being, forming a genuine connection. Speaking of the Federation, Director Ellison interrupted, approaching their table. I've just received word. They're sending an evaluation team. Arrival expected within 2 weeks. Lena set down her fork. 2 weeks? That's premature. We've made progress, but domestication is a long-term process. We're nowhere near ready for... The decision isn't ours to make. Dr. Oren, Ellison cut in. The project timeline has apparently been accelerated due to security concerns at other outposts. They want to assess viability for immediate expansion. What kind of expansion? Lena asked, a sense of dread growing within her. Military applications, primarily. The Pukthor attacks on Southern Ridge Outpost last month resulted in significant casualties. The Federation believes domesticated Zorax could provide an effective countermeasure. The table fell silent. Lena exchanged glances with Zara, who looked equally troubled. They'd known about the commercial applications from the beginning, but the acceleration toward military use felt wrong, especially now that they understood more about these creatures' intelligence and emotional capacity. We'll prepare for the evaluation, Lena said finally. But I want my concerns about rushed deployment noted in the official record. Noted, Ellison agreed, though his expression suggested he considered her concerns naive. In the meantime, accelerate the training regimen. The evaluation team will expect demonstrations of obedience and protective response. As Ellison departed, Lena pushed her plate away, appetite gone. This isn't right, she murmured. 7 isn't ready. None of them are. What choice do we have? Rafe asked. It's a Federation project. They make the calls. We could present alternative applications, Zara suggested. Search and rescue, environmental monitoring, ways to utilize their abilities without putting them directly into combat situations. Lena nodded slowly. That could work. We'll need comprehensive data on their intelligence and emotional capacity. Rafe, can you prepare a presentation on the neural complexity we've documented? Consider it done, he agreed. Though I'm not sure the Federation will prioritize ethical considerations over military advantage. Then we'll make them understand what's at stake, Lena said firmly. These aren't mindless weapons. They're sentient beings capable of trust and loyalty. Exploiting that for warfare isn't just ethically questionable. It's short-sighted. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. 3 short blasts that indicated a perimeter breach. Malk's voice came over the outpost's communication system. All personnel to secure stations. Pukthor pack detected approaching from the southwest. This is not a drill. Lena was on her feet instantly, exchanging worried glances with her colleagues. Pukthor attacks had become increasingly frequent and bold in recent months. But a direct assault on the outpost was unprecedented. Security teams to defensive positions, Malk continued. Science personnel to central shelter. Instead of heading for shelter, Lena turned toward the containment section. I need to check on 7, she explained, when Zara caught her arm. Are you insane? Zara demanded. There's a pack of death monsters heading for us. And you want to visit another death monster? 7 will sense the danger, Lena insisted. I need to ensure it remains calm. If it goes into a territorial rage while confined. Understanding dawned on Zara's face. It could injure itself trying to break free. Go. I'll cover for you with Malk. Lena rushed through the corridors, passing security personnel moving in the opposite direction, armed with pulse rifles and wearing heavy combat armor. The outpost's outer doors were sealing automatically, blast shields descending over windows. When she reached the containment section, her fears were confirmed. 7 was in a highly agitated state, pacing the perimeter of its chamber, spines fully extended and glowing with threat displays. It roared upon seeing her. Not in aggression, but what seemed like frustrated warning. "You sense them, don't you?" Lena said, approaching the transparent wall. "The Puck Thor." The creature pressed a clawed limb against the barrier, eyes fixed on hers with unmistakable urgency. "I know you want to fight," she told it. "It's your natural response, but you're safer in here." Seven made a series of vocalizations, complex sounds they'd begun documenting as a form of communication, and scratched at the barrier with increasing force. Lena's comm unit crackled. "Perimeter defenses engaged," Malk reported. "Estimating 20 Puck Thor. Largest pack we've recorded. They're testing the energy fences systematically. These aren't ordinary hunting behaviors." "They're coordinating," Lena realized, watching Seven's continued distress. The Zorax understood something they didn't. A decision crystallized in her mind. Dangerous, possibly career-ending, but suddenly clear. "Rafe," she called over the comm. "Are you monitoring Seven's neural activity?" "Yes," came the reply. "Off the charts. Fight response fully activated despite the nanobots." "Can you modify the nanobot parameters? Maintain cognitive control but allow for defensive aggression?" There was a pause. "Theoretically, yes. But why would we want to?" Realization dawned in his voice. "Lena, no. You can't be serious. The Puck Thor are organized and determined. Our defenses might not hold. Seven understands these predators better than we ever could. Director Ellison will never authorize releasing it," Rafe protested. "Then don't tell him," Lena decided. "Modify the nanobots. I'll take responsibility." Another pause. Then, "Parameters adjusted. But Lena, this is—" "The right call," she finished for him. "Trust me." She approached the containment controls, entering her override authorization. The system requested secondary confirmation, a safeguard to prevent accidental release. Without hesitation, she pressed her palm to the scanner. "Biometric confirmation accepted," the system announced. "Warning, containment release will violate security protocols. Proceed." "Proceed," Lena confirmed. The transparent barrier began to retract. Seven immediately stepped forward, but instead of charging past her, it stopped, lowering its massive head to her level. Those intelligent yellow eyes held hers. A moment of understanding passing between woman and predator. "Together," Lena said softly, reaching out to touch the creature's snout. "We face them together." Seven made a low rumbling sound that she interpreted as agreement. Then it straightened, spines glowing with battle readiness, and moved toward the corridor that would lead to the outpost's main section. Lena followed, keenly aware that she had just crossed a line from which there was no return. They encountered Malk in the central hub, where he was coordinating defense teams. He froze mid-sentence at the sight of the Zorax moving freely through the corridor. Lena walking calmly beside it. "What have you done?" he demanded, raising his weapon instinctively. "Put that down," Lena ordered. "Seven isn't the enemy here. It understands the Puck Thor better than we do. It can help." "Help? It's a wild animal!" Malk's finger tensed on the trigger. Seven growled, sensing the threat, but remained beside Lena without attacking. "Does that look like an uncontrolled predator to you?" Lena challenged, gesturing to the Zorax's disciplined stance. "It could have killed me the moment I released it. Instead, it's waiting, ready to defend this outpost, to defend us." Before Malk could respond, an explosion rocked the building. "South barrier breached," came a panicked report over the comm. "Puck Thor inside the compound." Malk hesitated only a moment longer before lowering his weapon. "If that thing turns on my people—" "It won't," Lena promised. "Where's the breach?" "Maintenance access, south quadrant. We've got teams converging, but—" Another explosion, closer this time, cut him off. The lights flickered briefly before emergency power engaged. Seven roared, not in fear, but what sounded remarkably like determination, and began moving toward the source of the disturbance, its powerful limbs carrying it with startling speed. "Stay here," Lena told Malk, already running after the Zorax. "Coordinate your teams to support, not engage 7. She struggled to keep pace with the creature as it navigated the corridors with unexpected familiarity, as if it had memorized the outpost's layout during its captivity. When they reached the south quadrant, the scene that greeted them was chaos. 3 security officers were down, their armor shredded. A pack of Pukthor, lupine creatures with multiple limbs and exoskeletons like burnished copper, had forced their way through a damaged section of wall. Unlike the solitary Zorax, the Pukthor were pack hunters, using coordinated tactics to overwhelm prey. Their elongated heads housed razor-sharp mandibles, capable of cutting through metal, while their slender bodies moved with frightening speed. 7 assessed the situation in an instant and charged into the fray without hesitation. The Zorax moved with lethal precision, its massive form creating a barrier between the retreating humans and the advancing Pukthor. The invading predators hesitated, clearly recognizing their ancient enemy. Then, the battle erupted in earnest, a whirlwind of claws, spines, and mandibles so fast that Lena could barely track individual movements. 7 fought with controlled ferocity, protecting injured humans while systematically driving back the intruders. The Pukthor, despite their numerical advantage, seemed unprepared for a Zorax within the human structure. Lena wasn't content to merely observe. She dragged injured security personnel to safety, applied emergency medical patches, and coordinated with Malk's teams to establish a defensive perimeter behind 7's one-creature bulwark. "It's protecting us," one of the wounded officers marveled as Lena treated his injuries. "Why is it protecting us?" "Because that's what companions do," she replied simply. The battle raged for nearly 20 minutes. 7 sustained numerous injuries, but never retreated, never faltered in its defense of the outpost and its human inhabitants. The Pukthor, facing unexpected resistance, eventually began to withdraw, dragging their wounded with them, another sign of their disturbing intelligence. As the last invader retreated through the breached wall, 7 turned back toward Lena, its breathing labored, bioluminescent blood seeping from multiple wounds. It made a soft vocalizing sound that seemed almost questioning. "You did it," Lena told it, approaching without fear despite the creature's battle rage. "You saved us." 7 lowered itself to a resting position, clearly exhausted from the combat. Its spines, which had been rigidly extended throughout the fight, now relaxed partially, the threat coloration fading to a calmer blue. "Get a medical team here," Lena called over her comm. 7 is injured." "Medical resources are prioritized for human casualties," came the response, Director Ellison's voice. 7 is the reason we have survivors instead of casualties," Lena shot back. "It defended this outpost when our defenses failed. It deserves treatment." A tense pause followed before Ellison replied, "Very well. Veterinary team authorized." As personnel moved in to secure the breach and tend to the wounded, Lena remained with 7, examining its injuries with concern. Most appeared superficial, but several deeper lacerations would require treatment. The creature allowed her touch without protest, responding to her soothing voice with remarkable trust despite the recent combat stimulation. "I knew you had it in you," she told it softly, stroking the smoother scales along its neck. "The capacity for protection, for loyalty. You proved it today." 7 made another vocalization, then gently pressed its massive head against her shoulder, an unmistakable gesture of affection that brought tears to her eyes. "You understand, don't you?" she whispered. "What we're trying to achieve here, what we could be to each other." The aftermath of the Pukthor attack brought unexpected consequences. Rather than facing disciplinary action for releasing 7, Lena found herself suddenly elevated to hero status. The security personnel who had witnessed the Zorax's protective behavior spread the story throughout the outpost, transforming perceptions overnight. Even Malk, ever the skeptic, had to acknowledge the evidence. "I still think it's dangerous," he told Lena during the debriefing. "But I can't deny what I saw. That creature deliberately placed itself between my people and the Pukthor. It took hits that would have killed humans instantly." Director Ellison was pragmatic as always. "This changes our approach to the Federation evaluation. Instead of basic domestication demonstrations, we'll present a field-tested protection asset. The recordings of Seven's defense will be worth more than months of controlled experiments." Lena felt conflicted. On one hand, Seven's actions had validated her theories about Zorak's intelligence and capacity for bonding. On the other, she worried that the military applications would now be accelerated, potentially at the expense of the creature's welfare. "We need to ensure the ethical framework evolves alongside the training protocols," she insisted. "Seven defended us because it formed a genuine bond, not because we programmed it to. That distinction matters." "The Federation will want replicable results," Ellison countered. "One successful specimen doesn't prove the method. Then we adapt the method to respect their intelligence and autonomy." Lena argued. "Force and control won't work with creatures this sophisticated. Trust and mutual benefit will." The debate continued for days as they prepared for the Federation evaluation team. Meanwhile, Seven's status at the outpost underwent a remarkable transformation. The containment chamber remained its primary residence, but it was now permitted supervised access to most areas of the compound. Security personnel who had once feared it now greeted it with cautious respect, some even bringing offerings of the synthetic protein supplements it preferred. Rafe's team adjusted the nanobots to a minimal intervention level, allowing Seven greater emotional range while maintaining safety parameters. The Zorax's intelligence continued to impress them all as it began to understand more complex commands and even improvise solutions to simple problems. "It's not just learning," Rafe explained, showing Lena the latest neural scans. "It's extrapolating, making connections we haven't explicitly taught. That's true intelligence, not conditioned response." 1 week before the Federation team's scheduled arrival, Lena took Seven on a longer excursion outside the compound, the first time it had been beyond the reinforced enclosure. Malk insisted on a security detail, but they remained at a distance, allowing Lena and the Zorax to explore the harsh landscape together. Seven moved differently in its natural environment, more fluid, more alive. It showed Lena features of the terrain she would never have noticed: hidden water sources, signs of burrowing creatures, even subtle changes in the soil that indicated mineral deposits. The creature was reading the landscape in ways human senses couldn't perceive. As they crested a ridge overlooking a vast red canyon, Seven suddenly tensed, spines partially extending in alert rather than threat. It made a low warning sound Lena had learned to recognize. "What is it?" she asked, scanning the horizon but seeing nothing unusual in the crimson dust clouds. Seven positioned itself slightly in front of her, the protective stance it had adopted since the Pukthor attack. It focused intently on a particular section of the canyon wall, where shadows created complex patterns. Lena activated her binoculars, adjusting the spectrum analysis to penetrate the dust. There, concealed among the rock formations, she spotted them, Pukthor, at least a dozen, watching the outpost from this elevated vantage point. "They're studying us," she realized, "learning our patterns, our defenses." Seven made another vocalization, more urgent this time. "Yes, we should return," Lena agreed, signaling the security team. "But this is valuable information. They're not just hunting, they're planning." The discovery added urgency to their preparations. If the Pukthor were developing more sophisticated attack strategies, the outpost's conventional defenses might not be sufficient. Seven's role had suddenly expanded from experimental subject to essential defender. "We need to understand why they're escalating," Lena told the senior staff that evening. Pukthor typically avoid human settlements unless food sources are scarce. These coordinated attacks suggest something has changed in their environment or behavior. Or they simply recognize us as competitors now, Malk suggested. We've been expanding operations, harvesting resources they might consider their territory. Zara, who had been reviewing regional survey data, looked up from her tablet. There's another possibility. The South Ridge mining operation reported unusual seismic activity 3 months ago, right before the attacks began. What if they've been displaced from their primary hunting grounds? Desperation would explain the increased aggression, Rafe agreed. But not necessarily the coordination we're seeing. Unless they've always been this intelligent. And we've underestimated them, Lena said quietly. Just as we initially underestimated the Zorax. The implication hung heavily in the air. If both dominant predator species on Gyra Prime possessed advanced intelligence and social structures, the ethical considerations of human expansion became considerably more complex. Regardless of the cause, Director Ellison said, breaking the contemplative silence. We need solutions. The Federation team arrives in 6 days. They'll expect not just demonstrations of Zorax domestication, but comprehensive security recommendations. I have a proposal, Lena said, having considered this problem since their return from the Ridge. But it's unorthodox. After releasing a Deathworld predator inside our facility, your definition of unorthodox concerns me, Malk remarked dryly. Lena ignored the jab. 7 has shown the ability to sense Pukthor at distances our scanners can't match. It also understands their behavior patterns instinctively. What if we develop an integrated defense system that incorporates Zorax sensory input, not just as combat assets but as early warning systems and strategic advisors? You want to put monsters on our Security Council? Malk's skepticism was evident. I want to recognize intelligence where it exists and utilize it appropriately, Lena corrected. 7 has demonstrated loyalty and protective instincts. If we can replicate that bond with other specimens, establish a communication system that translates their sensory input into actionable intelligence. It could work, Rafe said thoughtfully. The neural interface technology we've developed for the nanobots could be adapted to create a more sophisticated two-way communication system. The Federation would certainly be interested, Ellison acknowledged, though they'll want proof of concept before committing resources. Then let's give them proof, Lena said. 7 already understands basic threat communication. Let's expand that training, develop a formalized alert system, and test it before they arrive. The following days were intense, filled with new training protocols and technical developments. Rafe's team created a rudimentary translation system that could interpret certain Zorax vocalizations and physical displays as specific alert types. 7 proved an eager participant, quickly grasping the connection between its natural warning behaviors and the human response systems. Meanwhile, Outpost Security established a new perimeter monitoring protocol that incorporated 7's sensory input. The creature's ability to detect Pukthor at extreme ranges provided valuable early warnings, allowing defensive measures to be deployed proactively rather than reactively. Lena worked tirelessly, often sleeping in the laboratory to maximize training time with 7. The bond between them deepened further. The Zorax now responded not just to commands, but to her emotional states, offering what could only be described as comfort when she was frustrated or exhausted. You should rest, Zara advised, finding Lena dozing at her desk 3 days before the Federation arrival. You're pushing yourself too hard. There's too much at stake, Lena replied, rubbing her eyes. If we can't demonstrate a viable communication system, the Federation will default to their original plan, weaponizing the Zorax without consideration for their intelligence or welfare. And if you collapse from exhaustion, who will advocate for them? Zara countered. 7 trusts you, Lena. It needs you at your best. Reluctantly, Lena agreed to a short break. She visited 7 in its chamber, where the creature had been resting after a particularly intense training session. It raised its head as she entered, spine coloration shifting to the now familiar welcome pattern. "Just checking on you," she told it, settling on the floor beside its massive form. "You're doing incredibly well with the new communication protocols." 7 made a soft rumbling sound and shifted position, creating a space beside it in what had become a recognizable invitation. Lena smiled and moved closer, leaning against its warm flank. The creature's natural body heat was comforting in the artificially regulated atmosphere of the outpost. "I'm trying to protect you," she murmured, eyes growing heavy. "All of you. You're not just weapons or tools. You're magnificent beings with your own value, your own experiences." The Zorax curled slightly around her, providing support as she drifted toward sleep. In that moment of vulnerability, Lena fully realized how complete her trust in this once-feared predator had become. Somewhere along the way, the scientific objective of domestication had evolved into something more profound, genuine companionship across species boundaries. She awoke sometime later to Seven's alert vocalization, the specific pattern they'd established for Puckthor detection. Instantly fully conscious, she activated her comm unit. "Security. This is Dr. Oren. 7 is signaling Puckthor presence. Confirm perimeter status." "Perimeter scanners show no anomalies," came the response. "But, given recent events, we're dispatching reconnaissance drones to Sector." 7 made another vocalization, more specific this time, indicating direction and approximate distance based on their training. Lena relayed the information. "South Canyon approach, estimated 8 kilometers out. Multiple signatures." "Acknowledged. Deploying drones now?" Lena rose, placing a hand on Seven's neck in reassurance. "Show me what you're sensing." The creature led her to the observation window, positioning itself to face the exact direction of the perceived threat. Its spines had taken on the distinctive pattern that indicated detection rather than immediate danger, a subtle distinction they'd documented during training. Minutes later, the comm activated again. "Dr. Oren, drone confirmation of Puckthor movement exactly where indicated. Multiple packs converging, still at distance but definitely organized. We're tracking now." Lena exchanged a glance with 7, feeling a surge of vindication. "Log this as successful implementation of Zorax's early warning system. Full documentation for the Federation presentation." The early warning provided crucial preparation time. By the time the Puckthor approached within striking distance of the outpost, defenses were fully deployed. Strategic positioning of sonic deterrence, developed based on 7's reactions to various frequencies, disrupted the pack coordination, forcing them to retreat without a direct confrontation. It was the first completely successful defense without casualties or structural damage. A powerful demonstration of the integrated approach Lena had advocated. The morning of the Federation evaluation team's arrival brought clear skies and an unusual calm to the planet's typically hostile atmosphere. Lena stood on the landing pad with Director Ellison and the senior staff. 7 positioned slightly behind them, a calculated risk to demonstrate their progress immediately upon first contact. The Federation shuttle descended through the atmosphere, a sleek vessel bearing the insignia of the Military Science Division. As it touched down, Lena felt a moment of anxiety. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd learned about these remarkable creatures, would be judged in the coming hours. The shuttle's ramp extended, and 3 figures emerged, 2 in military uniform and 1 in the distinctive attire of Federation Science Administration. Lena recognized the latter immediately, Dr. Eleanor Voss, whose reputation for both brilliant xenobiology research and uncompromising evaluation standards was legendary. "Director Ellison," Voss greeted formally. Then her eyes moved past him to where 7 stood, massive and imposing, yet perfectly calm. "And this must be the famous XR7. Impressive specimen." "We call it 7, Lena stepped forward. "Dr. Lena Oren, lead domestication specialist. Yes, I've reviewed your preliminary reports, Voss replied, studying both Lena and the Zorax with equal intensity. Most intriguing, though I must say, having it present for our arrival is either supreme confidence or recklessness. Neither, Lena countered smoothly. It's respect. Seven has earned its place as a member of this outpost's defense team. Confining it unnecessarily would be counterproductive to the trust we've established. A flicker of interest crossed Voss's features. Bold perspective. I look forward to seeing the evidence supporting it. The evaluation proceeded through a series of demonstrations, first in controlled environments, then in field conditions. Seven performed flawlessly, responding to commands, demonstrating protective behaviors, and showcasing the early warning system they'd developed. The recordings of the Pukthor defense proved particularly compelling. The neural interface technology is impressive, Voss acknowledged during the technical review. Though I'm curious about the minimal nanobot suppression settings. Our models suggested much higher intervention would be necessary for safe interaction. Those models failed to account for the Zorax's inherent capacity for social bonding, Lena explained. Excessive suppression actually impedes the development of trust. We found that respecting their natural emotional range while providing consistent, positive interaction achieves more stable results. The military representatives seemed less interested in the ethical framework and more focused on practical applications. Time to full domestication? One asked bluntly. If we were to scale this operation, how quickly could we deploy Zorax units to threatened outposts? The phrasing, Zorax units, rather than individuals, made Lena's jaw tighten. That's not how this works, she said firmly. These aren't machines to be programmed and deployed. Each Zorax requires individual bonding with specific handlers. The process takes months, and forcing it would likely result in failure or tragedy. Dr. Oren's perspective has merit, Voss interjected unexpectedly. My preliminary assessment suggests the success with 7 stems precisely from the individualized approach. Mass production methods would likely yield unstable results. By the evaluation's final day, a tentative consensus had emerged. The Federation would expand Project Companion, but with modifications to Lena's protocols, rather than the military's preferred expedited timeline. New Zorax would be introduced gradually, with experienced handlers like Lena, training a new generation of domestication specialists. Most importantly, the focus would extend beyond purely military applications to include search and rescue, environmental monitoring, and outpost protection, roles that utilize the Zorax's intelligence and sensory capabilities without reducing them to weapons. You've done remarkable work here, Dr. Oren, Voss told her privately as the team prepared to depart. Your approach challenges our conventional understanding of interspecies relationships. I'll be recommending continued research along these lines, with expanded ethical protocols to protect both human and Zorax interests. Thank you, Lena said sincerely. They deserve to be recognized as partners, not just assets. Voss smiled slightly. A perspective that would have been dismissed as sentimental a generation ago. Perhaps we're evolving too. After the Federation team departed, the outpost settled into a new routine. Construction began on expanded facilities to accommodate additional Zorax specimens. Lena's team grew to include specialized trainers and communication technologists. Seven, as the pioneer, assumed a unique role, not just as Lena's companion but as a bridge between species, helping to introduce newly captured Zorax to the bonding process. 6 months after the evaluation, Lena stood on the observation platform, overlooking the expanded compound. Below, Seven moved among 3 younger Zorax, demonstrating behaviors and vocalizations that had become part of their developing communication system. Each of the new specimens had been paired with a primary handler, following Lena's model of individual bonding. Zara joined her at the railing. Remember when you first arrived? Malk was taking bets on how long you'd survive. Lena laughed. And now? Now he's requesting a Zorax partner for the security division. Says they're more reliable than half his officers. They watched as Seven guided one of the younger Zorax through a complex obstacle course designed to simulate rescue operations. The creature's natural agility and strength made them ideal for navigating the dangerous terrain of Gyra Prime. The Federation's initial report classified this project as an unqualified success. Zara mentioned. They're already talking about expanding to other Deathworld species. Let's hope they maintain the ethical framework, Lena said. These aren't pets in the traditional sense. They're partners. Partners that happen to be soft and surprisingly cuddly when they're not terrifying death monsters. Zara added with a grin. It was true. Despite their fearsome appearance and lethal capabilities, the Zorax had revealed an unexpected aspect of their nature. They enjoyed physical contact with their bonded humans, often initiating what could only be described as affectionate interactions. Seven looked up at that moment, sensing Lena's attention. It made the distinctive greeting vocalization they'd developed, then returned to its demonstration with the juveniles. You know what I find most remarkable, Lena said softly. After everything, the training, the battles, the scientific breakthroughs, what humans ultimately wanted from these apex predators was exactly what we've always wanted from Earth's dangerous animals, something to love that loves us back. Even on a death world, we just want something soft to pet, Zara agreed. Soft is relative, Lena laughed, thinking of Seven's armored scales. But companionship seems to be a universal desire, for them as much as for us. As the red sun of Gyra Prime began to set, casting long shadows across the compound, Lena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From fear to understanding, from control to partnership, they had discovered something profound about both human nature and the nature of the supposedly monstrous creatures with whom they shared this harsh world. In the end, perhaps the most dangerous predators in the galaxy had domesticated each other, finding in their unlikely bond something neither species could have achieved alone, a bridge across the vast evolutionary gulf that separated them, built on mutual respect and the simple, powerful need for connection.